You'll notice the button to the left of the CMYK button has a dot in it. This indicates that it's in a spot color. Inside the Swatch Options box, you'll be given the option to change the color type and the color mode. This spot color is in a CMYK color mode. If it was in an RGB or any other color mode, I would need to change it to CMYK. This color type is set to a spot. I want to change that to a process color to remove it from being a spot color. Once I've changed it to process, click OK. You'll now notice that the button to the left of the CMYK button has changed from a spot to a solid. This indicates that it's no longer a spot color, and we have correctly converted it to CMYK. Now that that spot's been converted to a CMYK color, let's go back to the Layers palette and take a look at some of the other elements on this document. I'll go ahead and unlock all the layers for right now. All of my text on this document appears to be in white. As you can see, my text is all in the text layer. But let's verify that this text is indeed in CMYK color. I'll select just one of the text boxes and then click on the text to bring up my text tool and then go to color. As you can see, this text is set to CMYK values of 0, so it doesn't need to be converted. Let's now take a look at some of the images on this document to verify that they're in CMYK color. I'll go back to the Layers palette, and I'm going to go ahead and lock my text and logo layers. And the first thing we'll look at is the image on the background layer. I'll select my background image, and then go to Links. Inside of your Links palette, you'll find the link information. From here, we can see that the color space is set to CMYK, so this image is correct and doesn't need to be converted. Let's take a look at a few of the other images. Again, this image is set to CMYK and is correct. This image is CMYK, so it's correct. And this image is set to RGB, so it's incorrect and will need to be converted. Unfortunately, InDesign doesn't have the ability to convert an image from RGB to CMYK. To do this, we'll need to open the image in a program like Photoshop or Illustrator to convert it to CMYK. To open an element in Photoshop or Illustrator to convert it to CMYK, we can either go to the image itself and right-click on it, and then go to Edit With and tell it which program to use to edit, or we can click on the link in the Links palette and then right-click and then go to Edit With and tell it which program. For images, photos, and other bitmap-based elements, it's best to use Photoshop to convert this to CMYK. If the element is in vector, it's best to use Illustrator to convert it to CMYK. Since this is a photo, we're going to open it up in Adobe Photoshop to convert it to CMYK. Once the image is open in Photoshop, I can convert it to CMYK by going to Image, and then Mode, and then choosing CMYK Color. Once it's converted to CMYK, I can close the image and then save it so that it saves the changes we made by converting the color to CMYK. And since this is for a printed piece, I always like to choose the maximum quality option. Once I've done that, I'll click OK, which will save that image, and now I'll go back to my InDesign document. Now when we look at our link info, we can see that this image is now set to CMYK color. Failing to convert RGB elements to CMYK could cause them to shift in color and produce undesired results when the piece is printed. So it's always important to convert RGB elements to CMYK. Now that you've seen how to convert an RGB element to CMYK, let's talk about document resolution. Similar to document color mode, InDesign does not have a document resolution setting like Photoshop and Illustrator do. Rather, individual elements inside the InDesign document will contain their own resolution settings. It's critical that any bitmap-based elements such as photos, background images, or sometimes logos that you add to your InDesign document be at least 300 dpi or ppi. We can verify an element's resolution by staying in the Links palette under the link information. For instance, on the image we just converted to CMYK, under the link information, look at the actual ppi. You can see here that it's set to 300. This image is high resolution and will print sharp and clear on the final piece. In some cases, you might be bringing photos or elements in that are 72 dpi but are large in their dimension size. For example, this photo here is 72 dpi, but the effective ppi is 473 pixels by 450 pixels, which is over the 300 dpi threshold. So this image will print sharp and clear even though the actual ppi is 72. So it's important to look at both the actual ppi and effective ppi. If the actual ppi is below 300, but the effective ppi is above 300, then it's no problem. The image will still print sharp and clear. Any elements in my InDesign document that have an effective and actual ppi below 300 would need to be fixed and swapped out, with elements that have an actual or effective ppi above 300. Saving your InDesign document with elements that have an effective and actual ppi below 300 could cause those elements to print with pixelation or look grainy on the final printed piece. Now that you have an understanding of document color mode and document resolution, let's discuss document sizing. In InDesign, the document size should be set to the final trim size. We can verify the trim size on this piece, which should be 8.5 by 11, by going to File, and then Document Setup. From here, we can see that the page size is 8.5 by 11. Also in this Document Setup dialog box, we can see that the bleed is set to 1/8 of an inch on each edge, which is the proper bleed size. Now that we've verified the document size, let's talk about bleed a little bit more in depth. In this document, the trim size is represented by the purple line, and the bleed area is represented by the red line. As I mentioned earlier in the tutorial, it's important to carry any images which need to go to the edge of the document when the piece is printed and trimmed out past the edge of your design by 1/8 of an inch on each edge. As you can see, my background image extends out past the document's edge by 1/8 of an inch on each edge. If the background in my design only went to the edge of the document, as I'll demonstrate by changing the size so you can see the difference of a document with bleed and without, then I would run the risk of this trimming off and having a white border when it's finished. I'll go ahead and move the bleed area back out so that it extends by 1/8 of an inch on each edge. This is now correct. Also, any images or elements which go to the document's edge need to extend by 1/8 of an inch, as seen in this image. You can clearly see the purple line is the document edge, and the image extends 1/8 of an inch to the edge of the bleed line. Everything in this document is correct and has bleed. Now that I've verified all the elements in my design are in CMYK and have a resolution of at least 300 ppi, that my document size is set up correctly, and that my design contains bleed, I'll use the template to double check the work I've done before saving. Before switching over to the template I opened a little earlier, I'm going to go back to the Layers palette and create a new layer called Template. This is where I'll place my template that I opened a little bit earlier.